He will pull you out of your darkness to a place to let your light shine that will give Him glory. Helen and her husband, David Smallbone, were raising their 6 children in Australia when a devastating business setback wiped out their family's livelihood. With a new baby on the way, they realized that God was opening doors around the globe in Nashville, Tennessee. 3 decades later, the Smallbone family has inspired millions of people with their radical faith in the Grammy-winning music talents of Rebecca St. James and For King and Country, Joel and Luke Smallbone. Today, Helen shares a behind-the-scenes view of their family life in her new book, Behind the Lights, The Extraordinary Adventure of a Mom and Her Family. This is her story. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Helen, what a blessing and honor it is to be invited to your farm and it's an amazing, beautiful place. And we're in your studio here. And tell me about this room.
Well, this room, when we first moved in here, was actually the farmer who built this property. It's an older property. He used it as his workroom. So it had his saws, etc. in it. Then we converted it into a sort of a distribution office house. It's had, I don't know where it went after that. And then it's, in the last few years, it was actually the beginnings of For King Country's first offices, low rent, always important to keep the expenses down. And lately it's just sits here and is a storage room, really.
Well, you know, a lot of people don't know that you are the mother of amazing music talent that has reached the world, Rebecca St. James, For King and Country. But it all started in Australia.
It did all start in Australia, yes.
Let's go back.
Well, I married my husband fairly young. He was very marketing management oriented. He worked in secular music and realised that he did not wish to market and promote people who had nothing to offer. And it really disturbed him that you see these stars off stage, and he said there was just emptiness. So he decided he wanted to get into Christian music. So the first concert that we ever attended as a family was when Rebecca was 6 weeks old. And it was a Larry Norman concert in the Sydney Opera House. And he then proceeded over the next about 15 years, bringing a lot of the major Christian artists. It was the beginning of Christian music in America, and we would bring them down to Australia. He also had a small record company. At one point, he had the gamut. He had a music magazine, he had a Christian bookstore, he had a record company, a distribution company, and concert production and management. So obviously he grew so fast you've got to remember Australia has about the same land mass as the central area of America. However, you might have 300 million or so, maybe even more than that now, where we have about 30 million. And in those days, it would have even been less than that. So and Australians sort of are more post-Christian. And so we don't have very many active, probably 5% of that population would be active Christians. So you've really got a very small marketplace. And by the time he was getting close to 40, he was realising, I don't know if I can keep doing this for the rest of my life, because I'm only as good as my last tour, I'm only as good as my last, marketing opportunity. So it was stressful, but we grew up around all the major artists. It was pretty grand.
Well, tell me a little bit about your faith and David's faith. When did you become believers and followers of Jesus?
We both grew up in very similar homes. I'm actually a pastor's kid, and I'm the youngest of 3 brothers. David's family, his father was a lay preacher, which is sort of a step down from being a pastor. We both moved a lot. We actually had the same families. He's 3 boys and a girl. I'm 3 boys and a girl, both the oldest are David's. I mean, the similarities are just staggering. We married when I was fairly young. I was 20. Started having kids at 22. Ended up with 6 kids. Our faith journey really, mine, mid-teens, I really committed my life and took Jesus seriously. My dad had a bit of a revival in his ministry at about that time, and we really went deeper in our faith. It was, and we carried that into marriage. Part of David's wasn't as serious about his faith, but God has that way of making you go deeper.
So from Australia, how did you get to Nashville?
We had 3 major doors closed. We actually, on a tour, lost $250,000, which we knew we were not going to trade out of. That was close.
Was this back in Australia?
Back in Australia, close to David's 40th birthday. There were 2 other opportunities that he thought that he might be able to continue in Australia. He actually started recording music at Hills CLC, which then ended up becoming Hillsong Music. He was the originator of that. The Hills Church took it back. That door closed, and then he had another opportunity to come to America with Carmen. He actually bought our tickets to come over to America, and then Carmen pulled out. So we were left with our tickets, but no job. So he came over here mid-1991 and found an artist that he was going to manage, and that was what led us over here.
So I have read when you got here, it was very, very difficult. You had your 6 kids.
I was pregnant with number 7.
Number 7.
No health insurance. We didn't have that little nest egg to rely on. No family, minimal friends, some work acquaintances from David's work in Christian music. And so we moved into a rental house in Brentwood in Nashville, and we had no furniture. The kids were sleeping on beds made out of clothes. And we really just treated it as a bit of an adventure.
Were there any times, though, you wondered what God was doing?
I think when David lost his job a couple of months after we were here, we were very much like, okay, this is pretty dramatic. And then we were like, what on earth is God doing? He leads us here and then you lose your job. But in those early days, when you've got nothing to go back to, you've got to go forward, and you go forward one step at a time. And so we gathered around as a family and we prayed, and we saw God answering those prayers and providing us with miracles. We got a house full of furniture. A local Sunday school at Baptist Church provided us with all our furniture in their house. They continued to support us. We started working together as a family. We were doing raking leaves. We were given a lawnmower the following summer, and we would mow lawns. Rebecca started cleaning, babysitting, and it was really the kids working that actually put food on the table. And David picked up another job in management, and that paid our basic bills, but it was still pretty hand to mouth.
That is amazing. And it's interesting how God started turning your life around.
Very slowly, step by step, and whenever we were discouraged, something that would happen that would just say, just keep going, keep going. And Rebecca, we arrived in August 1991, and Rebecca got signed, I believe, in 1993, and her first album, which was called Rebecca St. James, came out in 1994.
How old was she then?
16.
16, very young. Helen, we're going to talk about that when we come back, how God turned your whole life around. Helen, let's talk about Rebecca's journey and what God was doing in her life and in your life.
Rebecca actually started singing before we left Australia. We went to the kids. Our life in Australia was really normal. That's a really good thing to mention. Our kids were in Christian schools. We were, had our own home in a nice suburb of Sydney. She was recognised as having talent musically back in Australia. At the local school. She then had an opportunity of supporting Carmen at the age of 13, doing 3 songs as an opener for Carmen and his Australian tour. So there was a background. So before we left Australia, David decided that he knew the praise and worship music that was coming out of the church in Australia was very innovative. And so he said, let's use some of those songs. Let's get Rebecca to record some of that music. So when she came, she had sort of started already down music, and that was one of the things that David thought that coming over here he would explore. When she was signed in 1993 to Forefront Records, it was actually a development deal. The album came out in 1994 and she started touring. She was at the ripe old age of 16. And it was a shock because we had, for those 3 years, really spent all our time together. I mean, we were working together, we was homeschooling. And then when Rebecca started touring, it was sort of like, oh, wow, this is different. So David thought, she did a couple of support act tours, and then he thought very early on, she's just going to go out and do tours at church. And so he decided that we would do it as a family. So he brought over a cousin who was Rebecca's age. I think she was 18 at the time. He got Daniel, who was 16, to be taught how to set up the lights and run the lights. And then from then down, all the kids started working as support acts, or not support acts, but just doing the behind the stage, you know, setting up the stage, doing the lights, doing the sound, setting up the stage management. They started, so we toured together.
So everybody felt a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Because we couldn't bear being apart at that point. And this was the way David saw cheap labour, keeping in the black, and just doing it simply. And that's how we started.
What was those days like?
We would travel, first up we travelled in a 15-seater, pulling a trailer. And so that was very together. And then the next step after that was, once the second album came out, we actually got RVs and motorhomes, and so we would travel in motorhomes. And we actually continued travelling in motorhomes as a family. We'd have the band in one motorhome once Rebecca started with a band, and the family in the other. And we toured that way probably for another, I reckon, 6 to 7 years.
6 or 7 years.
So the kids had a very different childhood once we got here.
Now, was there any jealousy or anything like that, or?
I don't think so, no, because they saw how hard it was on her. You know, it's not easy,
No,
particularly
it's not.
being a solo artist, being a female. I mean, Christian music's very hard on their women. So they were very content, I think, in their background roles. Joel actually started at age 12 at showing very strong signs of being able to see how a church could be modified for a rock and roll band, and he became stage manager. And then David had him starting to prep doing background vocals for one of Rebecca's songs when he was 12. And the fateful day came when he said, okay, you're ready to perform. And it's intriguing because Joel's now in For King and Country.
And a lot of people don't even know that.
No, and he's 12 years old, and David says, tonight you're going to sing with Rebecca. And he said no. And I don't know why he thought he was practicing. I mean, I just have no idea. And he said, I'm not going out there, you can't make me. And we were like, well, maybe we can. Anyway, he went eventually. He cried. He said he went out to the family dog in the RV and cried. And then he came back and he did what he was told and went on the stage, and really he's never been off it since.
Was he scared? I mean, was he?
I think he was scared. And I just said to him, I sat down, I said, Dad's not going to ask you to go do that if he knows you're not ready. You're ready. You can do this. You've practiced. You know what you're doing. And as I say, he fell in love with it.
So he's never been off the...
No. He's been her background singer, then right through until about age 16, when he then went to his father and said that he wanted to continue to pursue his own career following Rebecca.
So how was that?
It was an interesting journey. Rebecca, you know, she continued to do albums. I think she did about 10 albums over that time. I think she wrote 12 books. For Joel, it was, he said he wanted to do his own artist thing. David said, well, we'll set up some writing for you, songwriting. You need to write your own music. And he did that. And frankly, David had some very unenviable conversations because he actually had to go to Joel and say, well, for one, the songs aren't good enough, which is pretty hard. And then after a few more years of more writing and doing Rebecca's background vocals, etc., David had to go to him and say, really, you're competing against the best in the world as a solo male artist. He said, frankly, I don't think you've got a good enough voice to be a solo artist. You're going up against the best. He said, but you know what? Your brother Luke, he has a really great voice, and if you become a duet, then you get into your own area.
How'd he take that?
He felt like he was pulling, I think, a wagon behind him, like I'm the man and I got to drag you. And then they started songwriting together. They started doing performances together. They actually did Rebecca's background vocals together, and then they started doing their own like support act, little duo with the very creative name of Joel and Luke. And they did that for quite a few years. God took them on a very special journey of preparation, because it wasn't felt, Joel never felt that he was equally partnered in those early days by Luke. He really didn't want him. He felt like he had no choice. So God had to really do some strong preparation work over about an 8 to 10 year period to really make a solid foundation there.
And now for King and Country and Rebecca St. James. What has that journey been like, from going from an apartment with no furniture and your husband managing this super music artist that is reaching millions around the world?
For King Country? Yeah.
Both of them.
No, both of them. Rebecca, when she retired, the boys were just starting to be their own career. That transition period was pretty hard on David, because he's managed differently to most managers in the fact that he's a partner. So he was equal partners with Rebecca, and for the boys, they wanted him to be involved, so it became a third, a third, a third. And that was the foundation which they did it. So he has no other artists to sort of say, well, while you're getting your life together, I'm going to go over here and manage these people and we'll see how it works. I mean, he's fully in. So that transition period from Rebecca to the boys was actually another sort of harder time for us as a family.
How does a success affect the family? Anything?
I think because they've grown up around it, both in Australia from when they were babies really, to here, it's actually, they're fairly well grounded. They know it's in proportion in their lives.
When we come back, I want to talk about what it's like to be a mom to all your children.
Okay, you look forward to it.
Helen, you have a new book coming out.
I do, yes. It's called Behind the Lights, and it's actually my memoir. It's a bit of a stretch for this mum who's always been behind the scenes, which is why it's probably called Behind the Lights, because I don't love being out in front of everybody.
Well, tell me a little bit about what's in the book. Do the kids want to read it, or?
Well, when I finished the book and it was in its sort of final stages of editing, I went to my co-writer and I said, you know, I'm writing all about Rebecca's career, how it started and what it was like, and then I've got all about For King Country, because they had this long period of time of transition from Rebecca to them, and it was sort of an 8-year journey that I call it, being like going in the wilderness, going backwards and forwards before they actually started to take off. I said, oh, maybe I need to get them to read it, you know, just to make sure that they sort of agree with what I'm writing. And she came back emphatically and said, oh, no, dear. They will change it, because their memories are going to be different to yours. This is your memoir. This is how you saw the journey as the mum of Rebecca St. James and For King Country. And so it goes further than that. It really goes back to the gamut of when we were in Australia, who David is, who I am. Then it's our journey together after we were married in Australia, then how we lost everything, because really those careers have been birthed out of failure. Our lives would have looked very normal if we had stayed in Australia, and none of this would have happened. So it was God closing those doors that changed our direction, our life direction, to a whole new way and a new life. He built a strong foundation of us working together, of being together, and that's really, I don't know what, so I'm writing about all those background things. And my premise is to really encourage others on their story. I mean, everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story.
And I love that. I love the way God leads and intertwines our stories, and then what he does in our stories that really shows us his faithfulness and goodness. And even though these careers have been birthed out of failure, it's his restoration. I mean, the farm that we're filming this on is his restoration. This is our family home. We've been on this property for over 25 years, and we've been in America for 30. So he's led us on a journey we never anticipated that we would be living, but this was his journey.
Tell me about this farm.
Well, when Rebecca was in the height of her career, David decided that he would want to start to document some of her. We were traveling over internationally. We were traveling to Europe again as a family. We were doing it. We were on the road as a family. And he thought it would be great to get our second oldest son a video camera to actually start to record some of the behind the scenes stuff. When we would come back to the property here, Ben used that camera to start making movies. So we'd have youth group kids over and they would make army movies, and they would use the old truck and they would run over the property. And that was really, then they started, Joel, it was when he was in his, I want to do music, he was copying NSYNC and all, and Backstreet Boys. And then they would write videos to do as intros for the local youth group, and they would film them, and it was all sort of Backstreet Boys, NSYNC music. I mean, it was again another foundation, because Ben is now making movies and does all of the boys' music videos.
Were there any other times in your life that you just said, oh, I can't do this anymore?
No, I think David says that I married him for adventure, and he says he's done a really good job of providing that for me. I actually like the fact that I really don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I mean, I would never have thought 10 years ago that I would be writing a book, that I would be doing interviews like this. The farm here is my happy place. The kids say that I've replaced each of them, and probably them and their husbands and their children, because altogether we're about 28 now. I've replaced all of them with animals. And so I have, I think last count, about 35 or so actually four-legged animals. And then I happen to get into birds, and we've got over.
Now, do you take care of it yourself, or do you have help?
Yeah, and my youngest daughter, Libby, is actually probably my partner in crime. I've partly done it because I just enjoy it, partly done it to have when the grandkids come. I feel like this is the healthiest environment you can possibly have. I have some help looking after them, because if I didn't have either Libby's help and other people's help, I think I'd actually have to downsize, because it is a fair amount of work.
It is.
But a lot of joy.
Now, you have a podcast.
I do. Yes, that's another miracle of God, that he actually got me involved in a podcast. I'm a co-founder of Mum Life Community, and my partner in that, Heather Houlay, and I have a podcast that comes out on Access More. And it's really to encourage mums. And I think they're under-encouraged, and I want to encourage them on their journey. I'm a huge believer in what they do, how they love their kids, how they sacrifice for their kids. I think that's modelled after Jesus, because he came to serve, not to be served. And I'm a big believer in supporting the family. I think the family is just so, it's God's idea for how kids should be raised. And so anything, now I'm feeding back beyond just my family now into a sort of a wider community.
And you and Rebecca now are doing Thursday evenings? Were you going out and doing some events?
Yes, we've started doing some events too. It's called Mum's Night Out.
Yes.
And she brings the music, and we do some interviews together of our story, and then I do bring a little sort of encouraging message. So yes, we've got a lot on our plate. I never thought retirement was going to look like this. I'm 66 years old. Like, I think I should be just sitting home here doing nothing, but God has some other ideas.
Well, one last word. What would you say to somebody that's going through a journey and where you've been? What would you say to them?
Pray. Lean into God. Jeremiah 29 says, for I know the plans I have for you. They're plans to prosper you. And I really, and to give you a hope and a future. And that's what he's done for us. I think between that verse and Ephesians 3:20, I can do much, much more than anything you can ask or even imagine, for my glory and through his power. That's our life story.
Helen, thank you so much. What an honor and blessing it is to sit down and to talk to you. And and hear about your journey.
Thank you, Terry.
My friend, are you going through a season where you feel like God has closed the door and your dreams have been shattered? My friend, He is taking you to a whole new place. It could be around the globe. Trust Him. He is going to do great things through your life that will give Him honor and glory. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.